Welcome to the AI Blueprint, Developing a Smart AI Policy webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of developing an AI policy for your organization and give you guidance on creating an AI policy that aligns with your company values, ensures compliance, and mitigates risk. You'll also learn how to integrate AI into business processes while maintaining privacy, security, and fairness across the organization. Before we get started, a few housekeeping rules. We are recording this webinar and we will send the link to all of our registered attendees within the next day or so. So if you're looking for recordings and materials, stay tuned. They will show up in your email. You may submit questions during the presentation in the questions section in the upper left-hand corner, I might be mirror, of your screen, and your questions will be addressed following the presentation, assuming we have time. We have a ton to cover today. For those of you who have attended Hub webinars in the past, you're probably used to this ask, but we really need you to fill out our survey at the end of the program. We take the surveys seriously, and they really inform our programming for subsequent and following events and each calendar year. So we're looking forward to your feedback. All right. Welcome to my friends and my colleagues joining me on this program today. I am Carrie Shevai. I am the Employee Benefits Compliance Practice Lead for the South Region. And on this program with me is my good friend, Carrie, who is also Employee Benefits Practice Lead for the West Region, and Jack Bottomley, who is our Cybersecurity Technology Artificial Intelligence Guru. I'm so excited for this program. I'm so excited that you get to join us. And I think we're going to jump right in with you, Jack. We're going to hit cybersecurity first. Then we're going to move into AI and HR, where we'll talk about Department of Labor EEOC. Then we're going to move to Corey, where he's going to talk to you about artificial intelligence and employee benefits. And then he and Jack are going to wrap things up with you with some highlights and some key takeaways. So as promised, Jack, would you please kick us off and give us some good foundation and working knowledge of the language, the concerns, the risks, and all the things that you're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, definitely want to set the stage for both of your sections with a first look really at what this technology does. And from that position, we can identify and understand the opportunities and the risks that are associated with its use. Fundamentally, AI is a machine's ability to perform the cognitive functions of a human brain, which sounds very nice, but really what we're talking about here is the ability to learn, to comprehend, to problem solve, to create. And this is not brand new. Voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, they've leveraged this technology and has been quickly adopted in everyday life because of its efficiencies. They save us time. And so this utility really applies in the world of business with the ability to drive efficiencies and profitability for organizations. So how does it do this? It uses machine learning, algorithms that leverage information, often vast pools of information, to identify patterns and trends that enable the machine to then make decisions and generate outputs. The more it learns, the better the quality of the information it is learning from, the more accurate it can become. So there are two types of AI. You've got predictive, which uses statistical analysis to identify patterns in historical data and use that to anticipate behaviors and events. Such technology might help with budgeting, anticipating sales cycles, or even planning staffing needs according to demand. The other side of it is generative AI, which uses deep machine learning to generate high quality text, images, other content based on the data that it's been trained on. We're quite familiar with this now with tools such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, seeing increased adoption. So how does this work? And I've attempted to break this down with a visual on the screen here. We'll start with the left. First, we have the user, and they use a prompt to instruct the tool. We'll call that input one. We have the language model's training data on the far right. We'll call that input two. Large pools of publicly available information that trains the model. And unless you change default security settings, any information that is ingested via prompts. And we're starting to think already about some cybersecurity considerations there. And then finally, we have the technology itself and its algorithms, how it actually runs on the inside. And we'll call that input free. So these three inputs are how we're going to think about risk. And ultimately, they determine the quality of the output and the efficiencies that are available through its use. So looking at the risks of AI adoption, we've attempted to simplify this into four buckets. Data protection really relates to input one, the user and the prompts. What information are we feeding the language model training data in order to benefit from the AI's capabilities? Are we sharing sensitive information? In many cases, yes, because our information is required for its use to drive efficiency and quality of utility. So how can we ensure that we can leverage the benefits of this technology without jeopardizing the confidentiality of our sensitive information? Accuracy, this relates to input two and the training data. What do we need to think about when it comes to the information that the language model is being trained on? We've seen that information comes from all types of sources. When you do a Google search, do you just take the first response for granted, or do you question the validity and the authenticity of the source? How can we ensure that the information being leveraged to generate content is trustworthy, is without bias? Can we rely on the users to constantly validate and verify outputs? What damage could misinformation lead to for our organizations? These technologies are prone to what is called a hallucination, where they provide very convincing arguments, but it's not grounded in fact. It can be obvious to tell when the truth is being grossly misrepresented, but when it's less obvious, it becomes deceptive and problematic. Finally, security operations and third-party risk management, TPRM, they relate to input free, which is the technology. Whether an organization is developing the technology themselves, or in many cases will be leveraging a third-party service, we are dependent on the security of the solution and therefore must conduct our due diligence accordingly. What questions do we need to ask those responsible for managing the integrity, the availability, and the confidentiality of technology in order to make an informed decision as to when and how to use them? So some really big questions there. And now we can think about some tips for managing these pools. So many of the buckets that we're talking about here, many of the top tips for managing AI risk are really relevant to IT professionals, such as restricting the use of unauthorized technologies, managing who has access, configuring technologies to protect sensitive information that may be used in prompts. But there are elements where HR professionals can be empowered to make a difference. Carrie, could we move to this next slide, please? Thank you. So, helping the organization to establish policy and standard requirements is something where the HR professionals can really get involved, and we're going to discuss that in more detail later on. We also need to incorporate AI risks and best practices into the organization's information security training and awareness program, something we'll talk about in more detail later on as well, and where HR can take a really active role. This could include sessions on the benefits of AI, how to make good prompts, as well as risk training to encourage use and not just fear of this technology. Finally, we need to make sure that security due diligence is conducted before purchasing any new technologies. While the IT team are ultimately responsible for conducting the due diligence, you can drive this standard by collaborating with them and ensuring that these security processes are not an afterthought, but are actively involved in the initial stages of looking at new solutions. Ultimately, this is just a new technology, one that has significant benefits. We just need to understand the risks and manage them accordingly. So Carrie, I really hope this sets the stage for you now to get into some of the more specific use cases. Um, Take it away.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. And you guys are going to hear me refer to these foundational principles as we dig deeper into AI and human resources. And you'll hear Corey echo a lot of this as well when he talks about AI and employee benefits. So let's jump right in. When I first started swimming around the AI pond, so to speak, Corey and I talked a lot about how are HR people using AI and where is this really efficient and useful? I'm going to date myself a little bit, but my best understanding of AI in HR a year ago was something like monster.com back in the early 2000s. And I earned a monster because we did so much recruiting at the company I worked at. I carried that little plushie around with me for like 18 years. No kidding. But Monster was revolutionary for those of you who were around and using it back in the day, because it created such efficiency around managing volumes of candidates and resumes and help sort and filter based on hits, right? The language and the words and the top search results and those sorts of things, like the old Google before AI. And today it's an entirely different world. And so I thought we'd start with what are some of the platforms out there and what are they doing? And one of them on here, I think, Corey, you know somebody really well who's actually using Lattice in their company, stood up live and implemented. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so that is correct. So one employer that I am very close with, they actually are using Lattice for their compensation data as well as their performance reviews. And I talked to this employer and they mentioned that Lattice is definitely using AI as part of their tools and they are talking about it with their clients. So I think that that's actually one of the key considerations here. Maybe some of these vendors are actively talking about AI with their clients. Maybe some of them aren't, but they're still incorporating AI behind the scenes.
That's such a good point. And a lot of HR folks are asking me when I speak at SHRM conferences and client events that we hold around the country, why do I have to worry about AI? Can't I just prohibit it and just make sure employees aren't using it? But you don't necessarily have that control or ability to prevent or prohibit AI in the workplace because so many of your HRIS vendors are already implementing or have already implemented AI into their systems. I was at an event in New Orleans a few weeks ago, and there was a payroll vendor there who stood up and said, yeah, we've got AI behind all of our applicant tracking. And in fact, you're going to see some litigation against a payroll vendor on that very issue. The other thing that's happening in the workplace is your phones. Siri has AI behind her now. I still fight with her every single day, but there is AI all around us. And so the best thing that HR can do is to start wrapping their arms around it and build some controls and policies and risk management strategies. So let's jump into that topic. How is HR using AI today? We're seeing it in recruiting, we're seeing it in learning management, we're seeing it on new hire onboarding. In all aspects of the employment relationship, we're seeing HR implement AI tools, whether they intend to or not. Like I said, a lot of the vendors out there are doing this regardless. And so what you're going to hear me talk about a lot today are the DOL and EEOC initiatives behind artificial intelligence in the workplace. And it's really gonna emphasize DOL today. Later on, I'll point a link out to you to their ebook that they just issued just a week ago. The DOL issued a 17-page ebook on AI, risk management, caution, guardrails, best practices. And so we're gonna talk a lot about that today. So one of the things DOL says about the use of AI in HR and in the workplace is use it to upskill and train your employees. Folks come to me all the time in all walks of life, different careers, different geographies, different industries, and ask me the same thing. Is my job in jeopardy? Is HR going to be replaced? Are recruiters going to be replaced? And one of the things the DOL says is upskill your workers. So while AI may create an opportunity for greater efficiency and may even eliminate some redundancies or administrative tasks or other job duties, AI also poses a great opportunity to upskill and train your employees, and this is exactly what the Department of Labor is asking you to do. They're also cautioning around AI, performance management, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And here's what I mean by this. I'll give you my own personal example. Anybody who uses Teams, you see the little bubbles, right, over the person's name, and it's green, yellow, or red. My name's Carrie Shevai. I am a Teams stalker. I absolutely hover over that bubble to figure out if someone's really away or just suddenly away or have been away for a long time. Can I call them? Are they really busy? Are they really not busy? But I'm checking in Teams to see if someone is available so that I can impede on their day and have a pop-up phone call on their computer. All of that data sitting behind that activity in Teams is available to employers for performance management. There's all kinds of monitoring softwares out there that employers can use to determine keystrokes, engagement, activity, eye contact, calls, the emails that we get in Outlook that tell us every week that we didn't save enough free time to be focused, and that automatic focus time that shows up on our calendars that I automatically delete because I don't focus on anything. All of that data is monitoring our activity. And the DOL is really, really concerned that people with disabling conditions may be perceived as not working as much or as engaged as they really are based on that data alone. And so the DOL is cautioning about using AI data as a heavy influencer, engaging somebody's performance or activity in their jobs on the day-to-day. And then the other thing the DOL is really asking employers to do with AI is use it to help prevent displacement. So rather than eliminate people from positions, can you upskill them? Can you move them into new jobs? Can you move them into new functions? Can you change the job duties so that they continue to be relevant and important to the business? And here's one thing that I think AI could be really fun for. So stepping out of the DOL for a second and just a fun idea. When I was in human resources and I was building new hire onboarding, I had this vision of this very robust team building new hire onboarding experience where people could do scavenger hunts through the company and interview individuals and find the one person who went to Hawaii last year, or the one person who is a Six Sigma black belt, or the 5 people who have MBAs. And you could do that with AI, and you can create like this gamified experience where you've got a team of people from different departments all onboarding together, create scavenger hunts, contests, tasks, and requirements and goals, and then have leaderboards. And people, as they accomplish those goals and achieve those tasks, gather that information, whether it's an employee handbook scavenger hunt or a talent or a job scavenger hunt, whatever it might be through the company. You give them Starbucks gift cards. Now you've got team building, you've got people who have worked their way through the business, been required to meet people, learn things about the company, learn things about your handbook. So that to me is a fun way to get out of just this pure regulatory conversation. But for those of you who've been to my programs, you know I can't actually get out of my own regulatory way. So let's talk about some of the risks of AI in the workplace from an HR perspective. There's a very big concern about artificial intelligence and discrimination infringing on employee and worker rights. And the first thing out of the gate is we don't actually know how that system was coded, how it was built. We can't look under the hood. We can't examine the system. And let's be honest, even if we could, would we know what we're looking at? I certainly would not. And so the Department of Labor has given us some things to consider as we make decisions regarding the implementation of artificial intelligence tools in the workplace. So what has the data trained on with respect to the AI? When you've got a coder that's building these systems, what data have they used to train the AI to get it ready to go to market? What factors are they weighing more heavily? Are they doing assessments? And what we're really looking for here are assessments of worker impacting AI. And worker impacting AI is a specific defined term by the DOL, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's artificial intelligence, software tools, and resources that will impact an employee's position, longevity, employment, decision to hire, decision to fire, all of the terms and conditions of employment that may be impacted by that artificial intelligence. Is that company, organization, technology firm doing audits to determine if there's a hidden system bias with respect to its programs that impact the terms and conditions of an employee's employment, and are they publishing those results? That would be part of the due diligence that Jack was talking about earlier. The DOL in its ebook, and there's a partnership we're going to talk about in a minute, has actually provided some design standards and suggestions. These impact assessments are one of those standards that the DOL recommends. So is your technology platform provider designing its program with the DOL artificial intelligence standards in mind? Does the system provide a way for employees to compensate or mitigate for those risks? What's the workaround? What's the appeals process? How does the system control for a disparate impact or discriminatory result as a result of the use of the artificial intelligence in the workplace? And does the developer have processes so that employees can report issues, whether it's to the company or to a government agency, with respect to employment law or perceived employment law violations? The other thing you have to think about is this is machine learning. Jack did such a good job explaining to us that the more data you put in, the more machine learns. What if the data being put in is being put in by a person with an unconscious bias? So go with me for a second on this. Let's say you have a recruiter who tends to lean into a certain demographic for making job offers or accepting the candidate for an interview. Let's say that demographic is a young male of a particular race or national origin. And the recruiter doesn't necessarily realize they're leaning into this particular demographic as they select candidates for interview and or hiring, but yet they are. And they're using AI through the process. Is AI now learning through an unconscious bias? And as it learns, does it then provide discriminatory results that are in line with the unconscious bias of the end user from whom the AI is learning? So this is why this assessment, reporting, auditing, pressure testing becomes really important. So let's talk about what some of these policies might look like. And there's two sections of policies that we're going to talk about, or policy tips. This first one is really around the regulatory, and a lot of this is coming right from our new DOL ebook. It's just been wonderful with respect to really framing the things that we should be talking about and thinking about. So the first thing you want to start with is a cross-functional committee. And later we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different positions that would make good sense to put on that committee. But you want to start with a committee because HR alone cannot build out these programs. To Jack's point earlier, there's a lot of risks here from a cybersecurity standpoint, from an IT standpoint, that HR may or may not be able to wrap its arms around. You also have to think about the contracts that you sign with third-party vendors. Has legal been involved in these processes? And so this is definitely an initiative that requires a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different backgrounds to build something that's comprehensive. And this isn't going to be a single policy. This is going to be various policies that will be updated and or new language that you'll be developing from an HR standpoint. So this is not a silo or a vacuum, a standalone policy like a sexual harassment policy, but this is going to be language that's updated throughout IT and end user computer IT policies and maybe PHI policies if you're a healthcare provider. You get my drift. It's very important that through that committee, you develop a process of oversight and AI governance. Are you auditing results? Are you ensuring you're not getting disparate or discriminatory results? If you're using AI for applicant tracking, kind of the easiest example to give, are you looking at the candidates that are at the bottom of the stack versus the top. And we're going to talk about some examples where there's actually been litigation as a result of discriminatory applicant tracking systems. What are your procurement policies? Do you have due diligence standards? The days of doing demos and picking a payroll software that you think has the functionality and the data interfaces that you're looking for are over. You've got to have a true due diligence program where you're thinking about cybersecurity, cyber risks, indemnification, and ensuring that your cyber insurance aligns with the technologies that you're bringing into the workplace. Be very careful of AI and any monitoring it provides. Remember, the National Labor Relations Board doesn't like anything that may interfere with Section 7 rights, the employee's right to freely communicate about the terms and conditions of employment in the event that they want to unionize. And so employees who feel like they're being monitored may feel less interested or more hesitant, that's a better way to say it, more hesitant when it comes to being able to speak freely about the terms and conditions of employment. The National Labor Relations Board is super concerned about this. This is such a big deal that when you look at the DOL ebook, you're going to see the DOL even reference National Labor Relations Act and the National Labor Relations Board. So now you've got two government agencies paying attention to this risk. This is a great place to reaffirm your commitment to non-discrimination, harassment, and no retaliation. Employees need to feel free and safe and comfortable to raise their hand and say, wait a minute, I think these results are infringing on my rights. Wait a minute, I need an accommodation, and not feel afraid of being retaliated against. It's also super important. AI should not be a decider, especially in the world of employee relations. AI should not decide who's hired, who's fired, who's disciplined. And this is a great place to reaffirm that to your employees. And employers, how are you going to use AI? And are you telling your employees about it? You're going to see that some states are going to require you to tell employees how you're using AI. But if you're using AI, do you have your own notice to your employees informing them of that? Department of Labor also says for our union shops on the call that if you're going to use AI in the workplace, you better bargain with your union about it. Now, here's the most important thing on this page. You thought all of the other things were super important. This is the most important thing on the page. This quote from the Department of Labor is what they call their North Star. This is the #1 priority for the Department of Labor. They want to ensure that you are engaging your employees in the utilization, implementation, and operationalization, I'm not saying that again, of AI in your workplace, especially employees from underserved communities. The DOL 2024 note on this slide is actually a link to that ebook, so you can get right to it. And some general policy tips. Like all policies, it should be transparent. All of this language should be widely distributed. Heck, you can even use AI to do training on your AI policies, risk mitigation strategies, guardrails, obligations, all of those things. Why not? You absolutely have to be sure that you're strictly prohibiting any intellectual property, copyright, trademark infringement, all of those things. Think about employees, whether or not they have to give you notice that they're using AI. And you also want to address the kinds of data that you can or cannot, your employees can or cannot gather using AI or put into AI. Like Jack talked about earlier, the security around these systems, depending on whether or not they're behind your servers or outside of your servers, is really questionable. DOL is really, really concerned about employee identity data and PHI being put into artificial intelligence platforms. And they instruct specifically that only the data most necessary with respect to employee identity can be put into AI. And the general standard rule is don't put employee identity data into artificial intelligence. Where is all this coming from? Well, the White House about 18 months ago issued an executive order and this blueprint for AI, the Employee Bill of Rights. And they charged all of the federal agencies with building out guidance and direction for the use of AI in their respective worlds, whether it's FTC, EEOC, or Department of Labor. As you can imagine, the Department of Labor is particularly focused on algorithmic discrimination protections. We don't want AI causing discriminatory results in the workplace, data privacy for employees in particular, and human alternatives. Think about the fallout, right? This is where the Department of Labor says, hey, use AI to upskill your workers. Hey, use AI to create new jobs for workers. All this oversight, all of the auditing, all of the pressure testing, these are jobs that are going to have to be in your workplace. In fact, the DOL's created a new position for your companies, and they call it an executive level data protection officer. This is a suggestion by the Department of Labor for all employers. Super interesting. They're creating new jobs for you. All right, so what's happening out in the world with respect to AI? Well, we see our first class action lawsuit against Workday. Now, we love Workday. We are not picking on Workday. In fact, we are a Workday company and a partner. But there was a candidate that had applied to a number of different positions at client companies of Workday. In other words, this individual was applying for jobs, and the companies that he applied to happened to use the Workday applicant tracking system. They used it for recruiting, they used it for interviewing, they used it for screening. And so he was getting rejected bunches of times. And so he formed a class action, and his claim is that he was rejected because he went to a classically Black college and AI figured that out. And because he said that the assessment, the personality assessment portion of the AI itself identified that he had anxiety disorder. Even though Workday was not the potential employer, because the system was processing data and providing recommendations and sorting preferential candidates over others, the court said that this lawsuit could move forward because the artificial intelligence was acting as an agent for the employer. So even though he didn't apply to work at Workday, the software was acting as an agent for the company. So guys, what's the lesson here? The lesson here is it's super duper important that you're pressure testing these artificial intelligence results. You're auditing them. You're checking them for validity, and you're checking to make sure that they do not have some inherent bias in the results. There's a lot happening at state legislation. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. Colorado was the first state to pass an anti-discrimination state law with respect to the use of AI. Illinois just passed a very robust state law with respect to the use of AI in the workplace. It will become effective in January of 2026. What's super interesting about the Illinois statute is it also addresses zip code as a proxy for race discrimination. The Illinois statute will require employers to provide notice to all applicants and employees of the use of AI in the workplace. So remember, I said earlier, one of your policy considerations is, are you notifying your employees where and when you're using AI in the employment relationship? Well, in Illinois, folks, you're going to have to provide that notice. Colorado, you already do have to provide that notice. New York just passed a statute, in 2023 passed a statute. Now the New York statute applies to New York City and any belly button working in the 5 boroughs. So it depends on where the individual actually sits and works, not where they live and not where the company is housed. It's a very interesting statute. I like some of the language. It does have a notice requirement. A great place to get some sample languages from their notice requirement. But it does require that any employers that are using any kind of machine learning or AI in the workplace, they've got to provide notice, and they also have to get independent auditors to audit those findings and results. So remember I said earlier, pressure test your AI, be your end user. In New York, you actually have to hire an auditing firm to do that kind of auditing and pressure testing. Okay. The Department of Labor, in its ebook, talks about its partnership with Pete. Now, when you click on this slide, folks, if you click on the logo in the top corner, that is a link to this initiative. And the Department of Labor and I are aligned on the following advice. Don't be overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed when I looked at it myself. It can feel very overwhelming. But this is a framework developed by the DOL in conjunction with Pete to help organizations begin building an AI and inclusive hiring framework. Now, there's a heavy emphasis here, especially for disabled individuals, but it's broad enough that it really, if you follow all of these steps and best practices, it really does, I think, address all forms of discrimination in the workplace. They talk about different roles and responsibilities in the organization and the opportunities for their involvement. This is a great starting point to identify who should be on your committee. Leadership, HR, DEI, IT, procurement and purchasing, legal and compliance. Now, the program has a 10-area focus. I know, it's so much. It's so much. And then when you dig into each of these focus areas, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So you do not have to take these in order. You do not have to do all 10. The DOL is very clear. Take this step by step. Pick the focus areas that make the most sense for your company and start where you think you have the biggest risk or the biggest opportunity to make an impact as you build an AI inclusive hiring framework in your organization. As you dig into the site, it's very self-explanatory and there's great templates and great suggestions. It's a vast multitude of information, but you're going to feel a little overwhelmed at first. And I love that they said, pace yourself, take your time, one step at a time. What is that? An elephant, eat the elephant one bite at a time. It's how I eat cake, one bite at a time. Okay, the EEOC also has a lot to say about artificial intelligence in the workplace. They have a terrific FAQ, not nearly as overwhelming as the Department of Labor guidance, but also incredibly useful and helpful, especially when it comes to recruiting, interviewing, ensuring that you're not screening out individuals who are otherwise able to perform the essential functions of the job. And there's a whole discussion on Family Medical Leave Act as well. We saw our first EEOC AI settlement. This was a group that was using applicant tracking, and it filtered out women applicants over 55 and men over 60. There were 200 applicants that were artificially screened out by the software. $365,000 later. You better believe the EEOC jumped all over this because it's such a great example. And so I covered a ton, and I am going to hand this off to Carrie to talk about the important integration of AI and benefits.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So just as Carrie started out her presentation with the idea that there's a lot of different AI in use in the employment law space, there's also a lot of different AI in use in the benefit space. And here we have just a couple examples, and we're going to go into more detail on how these actually work. And again, we're not endorsing these specific vendors. These are really just examples of different places that vendors in these specific spaces are using AI in. So let's jump into the next slide so we can go into some more detail. So here's a couple of the areas. Some of these were just mentioned on the last slide, but here's the ways that benefit teams are using AI. So one, harnessing the power of data. To this point, I think it's really important that employers, especially larger employers, understand who is actually working for them. Who are their employees? Now, once we understand our employees, we can provide them with benefits education. What if that benefits education was tailored to their specific needs? We have 5 different generations in the workforce, actually 6 now. And as part of that, different employees are going to have different benefit needs. Then we have decision support. And this really gets to the heart of benefits elections. How do we know what benefits to actually elect? This is where AI can be used to help guide employees to make those decisions that are best for them. Dependent audits are another hot topic because employers want to only cover those that are truly eligible for their plan. How do we ensure this? By completing a dependent audit where we're going to audit our plan participation and actually verify who is truly covered under our plans. And then we also have my favorite, which is the compliance research. So the compliance research section, this shows that we can use AI, some of the commercially available AI platforms, to ask benefit questions and get answers. But as we're going to discuss, are those answers truly the correct answers? Better yet, are we even asking the right questions? So next slide here, Carrie. So if you only have 50 employees, 100 employees, maybe they all work at your specific location. However, if you have 1,000 employees, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 or more employees, odds are you have employees at multiple locations and you might not know all of your employees. So what we recommend here, and this is actually a screenshot from an internal tool that we utilize, is taking a deeper dive into your population to understand who they actually are. By this, I mean, what are their demographics? How long have they been working for you? Are these experienced hires? Are these inexperienced hires? Better yet, from a benefits perspective, are they enrolling in benefits or are they waiving your benefits? All of this can be used to leverage and help understand the why. Why are certain groups not enrolling in your benefits? Are they too expensive? Do they value other benefits? Maybe they're a single earner household and all of the financial responsibilities for that household are their requirement. So as part of this, again, we recommend understanding who your population is so that we can then deliver them the benefits that they are going to value, which is ultimately going to make us more attractive as an employer. That brings us to the next stage, which is leveraging some of the different communication tools that we have at our disposal. So this can mean anything from interactive benefits guides. These can be web-based guides, these can be print guides, to chatbots, to open enrollment presentations. And the idea here, again, is that with 6 different generations in the workforce, different populations are going to A, value certain benefits, and then B, prefer certain types of communications. There could be some employees that are just going to want a presentation that they can view on their own. There's going to be some that are going to want an explanation of the benefits. There's also going to be different employees who value different benefits more or less. For example, an employee who's 28 versus an employee who's 58, they're likely going to have different benefits needs. How are we as an employer going to ensure that we are communicating to those employees about those benefits that are specifically valuable to them? Well, I can tell you that the easy way would be to just do one comprehensive presentation, but that is not going to be most efficient. AI can be leveraged to create different benefits presentations and open enrollment presentations that can help employees understand more about their benefits and what specifically they are going to value. Also, in regard to chatbots, so think about right now how many benefits related questions go to a human that could possibly be addressed by a chatbot. Think about things like, where can I get my SBC, or where can I request a new benefits card? All of these today could be answered by a human. If you are able to use a chatbot to then answer those questions, this goes along with what Carrie was suggesting about upskilling your population. This is going to increase efficiency by freeing up the time of that human to now work on things that actually require a human. Of course, these aren't going to be perfect. There's always going to be someone that prefers to reach out to that person that they specifically know and doesn't want to use a chatbot. Plus, I can also tell you that sometimes chatbots can be frustrating to use. But one of the beauties of AI is that it does continue to evolve. So hopefully these chatbots, they're getting better as time progresses. An example of kind of an early chatbot would be like a telephone navigation menu. Just earlier today, I was navigating one of these menus and Well, even though it had improved over the years, it was still far from perfect. It still wasn't giving me the options that best suited my needs. But again, this is where AI is evolutionary and hopefully will continue to improve as things move forward. We can move ahead to the next slide here. Okay, so deciding on benefits is a very, very stressful decision. As you can see from this individual here, they are clearly stressed out. Maybe they're stressed out by something else, or maybe they just don't know what benefit plan to enroll in. This is, of course, very timely as many employers are gearing up for open enrollment. As employees, we know that benefits are complicated as well. How do we make the decision that best meets our needs? There's always going to be individuals that think, well, this plan is the most expensive, so therefore it's the best for me, or this plan is the least expensive and it fits my budget, and therefore that's best for me. But this is also where AI can be used to help guide employees. Carrie and Jack could have different benefits needs than I do. When you implement AI to help guide employees, these are question and answer type tools quite often that are going to look at the inputs and then give me an output. However, as I was talking to someone internally here recently, they discovered with one certain platform that no matter what variables you changed, the result was the same. As soon as I heard this, I actually wanted to pull my hair out because I thought right away, this is an issue with the AI. If the inputs can vary considerably, meaning you're 22, 52, 62, and you're still getting the same result. Likewise, you've never been enrolled in an HSA, or you've been enrolled in an HSA for 15 years, and you have $10,000 or more saved. This should vary the outputs. However, if it's not, obviously this is a problem. So this gets to what Carrie was mentioning before. Make sure you are testing your tools. If you're releasing this to your employees can use it. You want to understand that it truly is giving them what they should be doing and individualized recommendations, as opposed to just kind of spitting out one generic answer regardless of the inputs. Next slide. Okay, now we're on to my favorite topic, which is compliance research. So I constantly do compliance research in my job. Carrie does this too. But what if we were using some of these AI tools, ChatGPT, Copilot, and any of the others that are out there to do our compliance research? So the first thing that I always think about here is garbage in, garbage out. By garbage, I mean, are we asking the right question? If we're not asking the right question, how can we expect to get the right answer? Even if we are asking the right question, how do we truly know that we are getting the right answer? Well, the only way to truly know is by actually doing supplemental research and verifying. For example, a lot of AI tools will provide a citation. So say I ask a question that comes under the guidance of the IRS. Maybe I find a resource right from the IRS. However, that does not necessarily mean that is the answer. Maybe that answer is giving me the answer, which is maybe the core rule, as opposed to the exception to the rule, which might apply to my given situation. Likewise, maybe it's giving me the exception. Also, another example, and I'm actually going to steal this one from Carrie because Carrie mentioned this to me recently. She asked an ERISA-related question to one of these types of programs, and the answer that was provided was an answer applicable to retirement plans, not health and welfare plans. So these are all nuances that employers that are using these have to absolutely be aware of, because if you're not asking the right questions and if you're not verifying the answers, even if it does come from a official source, how do you know that you're actually sharing that correct answer? And the answer again is that you don't know that without verifying that. Another example that I heard of recently was where an employer was using this to ask questions and it was getting correct answers. However, those answers were no longer timely. Thinking back to the COVID days, we had a number of different COVID era exceptions. In particular, the timing required to allow employees to elect COBRA and make COBRA payments. If you are getting those exceptions to the rules, and those exceptions no longer apply, this is a huge red flag. So my message here, you're going to hear me say this again later, is trust but verify. We can go ahead over to the next slide. So just switching gears a little, I do want to provide a little bit more information on fiduciary duties. These are a hot topic in the health and welfare space because we have some lawsuits that are ongoing relative to plans and their fiduciary duties. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on fiduciary duties specifically here, but just know that these are duties that plan fiduciaries owe to plan beneficiaries. Effectively, you need to act in the best interest of the plan beneficiaries if you are a plan fiduciary. Now, if we go on to the next slide, here's why these are important. TPAs and insurance carriers are using AI behind the scenes to process claims. As a plan fiduciary, you need to understand this. How exactly are they using this? Are they using this just to verify prior authorizations or medical necessity requirements, or are they using it to actually approve and deny claims? My guess is that many of them are using it to approve and deny claims. If a plan is particularly seeing high denial rates for certain procedures or certain services or prescription drugs, these can be red flags, and those red flags have actually led to some lawsuits related to AI. So on the next slide, what we have is actually some recommendations for employers with this regard. So I'm going to make this a little bit easier, understand whether they are using AI. Okay, they are. So now that you know that they are using it, understand how they're using it. How are they using it today? Are they going to be using it? Are they monitoring it? Are they testing it? Is this an ongoing process, or are they kind of just letting it be? Also, think about your contracts with your carriers and TPAs. Are there responsibilities or liabilities that the plan is going to undertake relative to this AI, or are you being indemnified? Is the carrier or TPA going to be responsible? And then also a hallmark from the fiduciary duties. Plan fiduciaries have a duty to monitor their service providers, including their TPAs and their insurance carriers. So they have a duty to monitor the ongoing use of AI by these service providers in the administration of the plan. And keep in mind, this goes far beyond just your main insurance carrier or TPA. This goes to all different vendors and other carriers that are using AI. So I also know there's been some cases regarding disability insurance and approving and denying claims there as well. So you need to think beyond the medical plan, even though we're focusing on the medical plan here. Next slide. Okay, so as sometimes happens in the ERISA space and the health and welfare space, we initially see the DOL focus more on retirement plans than health and welfare plans. Why? Because retirement plans hold significant assets as opposed to the health and welfare plans. So what happened here was the DOL recently took some cybersecurity best practices that already applied to the retirement plans and now extended them to the health and welfare plans. Why? Because AI continues to evolve, cybersecurity continues to evolve, and they really just wanted to, of course, highlight the importance of all of these best practices as it relates to not only the retirement plans, but also the health and welfare plans too. So we can move on to the next slide where we'll actually touch on some of these recommendations here. Okay, so some of these are going to sound repetitive because Jack and Carrie have already mentioned them, but this highlights that there are a lot of reoccurring themes here. So one, have a formal and well-documented cybersecurity program. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Once you have a program, you, of course, need to follow that program. Sometimes we like to say the only thing worse than not having a program or not having a policy is having one and not following it. Conduct prudent annual risk assessments. For those of you that are familiar with HIPAA, think about this too. We are required to do risk assessments in HIPAA as well. Have reliable annual third-party audits. Now, obviously, this goes beyond HIPAA, but it highlights the overall importance of cybersecurity. Remember, these rules came from the retirement plan space, which does not involve HIPAA. Even though now we already have HIPAA applicable to health and welfare plans, this kind of adds to the existing HIPAA requirements. Have strong access control procedures. Again, something else that I would say overlaps with HIPAA. We have to understand in the HIPAA sense who has access to PHI and how that PHI is being used. Also, what if someone has access to PHI and then they separate? Are you going to terminate their access? You absolutely should. And that fits in also to the cybersecurity access protocols as well. Next slide. So just like Carrie had, I believe 10 different areas from that DOL guidance. There's quite a significant amount here. Conduct awareness training, again, something borrowed from HIPAA. Many organizations are already doing this, related to HIPAA and unrelated. Why? Because there are constant cybersecurity issues out there. I know sometimes we make jokes about some of the old phishing schemes. You know, I am a prince, I've been deposed, and I have this fortune. The only way I can get access to it is with your social security number and your bank account information. We've all heard about those, and yes, those are still out there, but they've also evolved significantly. I recently heard about an employer that got one of these phishing emails, and it was written like it came from an employee, and it was sent directly to an HR leader, and it said, please update my direct deposit information to this information, and it provided a routing number and a bank account. If this was not caught, then this obviously could have been a huge issue for this employer. So anyway, that just highlights the overall importance of the cybersecurity awareness training. Have effective business resiliency programs addressing business continuity. Again, just like Carrie took us down her flashback with monster.com. I remember in the early 2000s where a bunch of us had to go to a different office location on a Saturday to see if we could get up and running at this remote location. These were long before the days of laptops and remote work. We had to see if we can get up and running just in case there was a physical disaster at our normal work site. So again, lots of different information here, and these are all things that employers should pay very close attention to. Let's go on to the next slide where we're going to kind of wrap up. And Jack, I'd love your input on these as well. Here's our key takeaways. And really what we've done here is we've kind of combined all of our areas. So adoption of AI technologies is increasing. It's fueled by the efficiency and profitability benefits that can support an organization's business objectives. I think that really hits the nail on the head, and that really shows why AI technologies and investment AI are increasing because of the gained efficiency and the probability of benefits. Again, efficiency here, not necessarily code word for downsizing, but I think as Carrie illustrated, is code for upskilling. So again, freeing up time of individuals to focus on other tasks where individuals are actually needed as opposed to where AI can be assistance. Of course, those AI technologies come with inherent risks that must be managed through effective corporate governance. HR professionals definitely have a role to play. One of the key takeaways that I have from when Carrie and Jack were speaking is that AI, it's not just an IT focus. It's not just an operations focus. It's not just an HR focus. It's all of them. Every different area that we've talked about today needs to be involved, because otherwise what's going to happen? We're going to have blind spots. We're going to miss things. As an HR professional, if you are not included or someone from your team is not included, they're going to likely be blind and potentially miss all the different AI considerations with HR. HR, of course, can embrace the AI opportunities, but have to ensure that they validate and pressure test all AI results. This is extremely important with regard to the AI tools that Carrie and I have mentioned. But then also keep in mind that in terms of an AI policy, I'd say there's really multiple focuses. I would say sometimes we're only thinking about can our employees use ChatGPT or a similar tool, and what are the guardrails there? Whereas on the other side, we have HR and possibly other business units directly using tools that are incorporating AI. AI should never be the decider. You're always going to want to pressure test and always verify. It's a little bit cliche, but we say keep the human in HR. You're going to want to verify what the AI is doing, whether it's a decision support tool from a benefits perspective, or whether it is a an applicant tracking system. And then again, my favorite, just to wrap up from my section, is trust but verify. Jack, any parting words, anything else that our audience today can take into account with regard to these takeaways?
I think you've summed it up really well, and it always comes back to the people. Securing AI use, a lot of this is falling on people to behave and follow policy. And we talked very briefly earlier about training and awareness, establishing a culture of security. When we talk about culture, we're talking about people. That's HR. So I think we want to really empower HR professionals to take action and making sure that users are leveraging this technology securely, because as we've seen in this tool, it is being used and there are a lot of benefits around that. So we shouldn't be afraid of it. There is a role for people in making sure that we use this technology effectively, and HR can play a really big role in that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So unfortunately today we did not have time for any questions. However, we will pass along your questions to a Hub representative for a follow-up. On behalf of Hub International, thank you all for attending today's webinar. For those of you in attendance, continuing education credits will be provided in your follow-up email, along with a link to the webinar replay. As a reminder, we ask that you please fill out the survey before you close out your browser. Your feedback will help us develop future events. This now concludes our broadcast.